Cyclist Emily Bridges has called out British Prime Minister Boris Johnson for commenting on trans athletes and saying that they shouldn't be competing in female sports. She revealed that his ill-informed remarks weren't only hurtful, but that they also resulted in threats against her. In today's video, we're talking about what she had to say about the hate that she's been receiving and more. Let's get into it. First up, Emily Bridges threatened by angry transphobes. 21-year-old Welsh athlete Emily Bridges made headlines earlier this year when she wasn't allowed to race at the British National Omnium Championships in the women's category. This happened just before the race, and she was obviously very disappointed. Her inclusion had previously started a debate that spread beyond just the sport of cycling. For some reason, Boris Johnson decided to weigh in on the issue as well. He stated that he doesn't think biological males should be competing in female sporting events. These comments came at a time when Bridges was already facing a lot of criticism on social media and even from fellow competitors. During an interview with ITV, Bridges talked about Johnson and said that it was really strange to see the most famous man in Britain talking about her and having an opinion on something he doesn't know anything about. And we agree. How is Boris Johnson qualified to say something about an issue as sensitive as this one? She revealed the response was exactly what she expected, and she received threats of physical violence from complete strangers. She said that while people are allowed to have an opinion, there's a way to go about it, and threatening to kneecap her is not it. Next, Bridges was really scared after these threats. Understandably so. Bridges was terrified after receiving these threats. She sadly revealed that she was often scared of hanging out in public because of who she is. She was worried that someone would recognize her and attack her. She said that these were very real concerns, and it was a very real fear after the comments were made. We really feel for her. No one should have to live in a state of constant fear. Considering how hateful people are against transgender people in general, it's really sad that Bridges has had to deal with all of this. It also shows that we still have a long way to go before trans people are truly accepted in our communities. And now, Bridges won't be able to participate in the Commonwealth Games. Some of Bridges' most vocal detractors pointed out that just a month ago, she had competed in the men's points race of the British Universities' championships. Bridges accepted that in hindsight, that was the wrong decision, but she only did that to remain competitive, especially ahead of appearing at the championships in Derby. At the time, the British cycling rules allowed transgender participation in women's races. She admitted that it wasn't the right thing to do, and as soon as she came off the track, she realized that she shouldn't have done that. She knew she was about to receive a lot of hate. After this, British cycling suspended its transgender policy pending a review to find a better answer. This meant that the cyclist from Wales would not be able to compete at the Commonwealth Games this summer, where transgender females are actually allowed to race in the women's event. She sadly said that her main goal for the season was the Commonwealth Games, and because she couldn't race this event, it was unlikely that she was going to be able to race any international events during the Welsh cycling's set timeline for the selection. She expressed that she is very proud of being Welsh, and she really wanted to represent her country. That's really sad. She deserves better. Next, the last-minute decision affected her a lot. Things were looking really good for Bridges before someone leaked her potential participation in the Omnium to the press, and that's when things started going horribly wrong. She revealed that the decision was very last minute, and now there's a lot of public pressure on her to stop racing for good. She said that when the policy was pulled, British Cycling promised to have a full review that would be initiated in the coming weeks. She explained that she still hasn't heard anything from the organization, which means that either they're not doing anything at all, or they're just not including her in the making of the policy. Apparently, they had emailed her and promised her that she'd be allowed to voice her opinions on what the new policy should be. We can't believe that one of the most promising young athletes in the world is being treated like this. The least British cycling can do is to be transparent with her instead of completely isolating her when she's going through this extremely difficult time. And now, Joe Smith speaks out about the hateful agenda against Emily Bridges. Last week, Emily Bridges won a fixed-gear crit race called the Thunder Crit, which was run as advertised, outside of traditional gender categories. After her victory, she was the target of a hate campaign from mainstream outlets such as the Daily Mail and the Daily Express. Bridges won in the Lightning category, which was open to trans men and women whose physical performance aligns most closely with cis women. Lily Chen, who also identifies as female, came second, and cis female Jo Smith came in third. For some reason, media outlets were really bothered by this. The Daily Express stated that both the gold and silver medals went to athletes who were male-born, implying that they somehow robbed Jo Smith. Jo Smith, however, celebrated the result and said that she was very happy to be on the podium. She added that this was an event with a different setup, open to all across the two categories and not a women's race. Commentating on the reports and response to the race, she stated that she was absolutely furious with the media and the individuals on Twitter using it to further their hateful agenda. She said that in any other circumstances, there's no way the national news would be interested in a small, unsanctioned race. Kudos to Jo for calling out the media on their disgusting behavior. Lastly, the riders haven't been divided by the media. Speaking to the Cycling Weekly, Emily Bridges stated that the riders have not and will not be divided by the media's hateful agenda. She praised the Thundercrit and called it an amazing event. She said that there was so much solidarity between all women, men, and non-binary riders, and the Daily Mail's reporting has only brought all of them closer together. Emily and Jo weren't the only riders to speak out against the media's hateful reporting. Kitty Dennis, who came fourth in the race, said that she was delighted with the format of the racing. She called the reporting from the media unfair and said that as a cis woman, she felt very happy to compete and didn't feel like she was at a disadvantage at all. We really hoped that moving forward, trans athletes and trans people in general stop receiving so much unjustified hate and things get better for them. Also, men like Boris Johnson should just stay quiet when it comes to stuff like this. Like, seriously, who allowed him to have an opinion on this? And that's all about Emily Bridges and her struggles following Boris Johnson's insensitive comments about trans athletes. Now, it's time to move on to some more related news. Starting with Wales's First Minister says trans women are women. On 7th of June, Mark Drakeford, First Minister of Wales, was questioned in the Senate by Tory MS Laura Ann Jones about the inclusion of trans women in sports. She said that while she wants trans athletes to participate in sport, she doesn't want people to be so inclusive that female athletes are affected. She insisted that women athletes are actually pulling out of their own categories because of this, and asked Drakeford if he believes trans athletes should compete in female sports. To his credit, the First Minister straight up said that transgender women are women and that there's no such thing as being too inclusive. He said that it's only by dialogue and by understanding that issues like this could be resolved. He also stated that inclusivity is absolutely what we should be aiming for here. Well said, Mark. Next, Louisiana bans trans women from competing in women's sports. A Louisiana bill banning trans athletes from competing in girls' and women's sports through college will soon become law. The Fairness in Women's Sports Act will require schools as well as universities to make teams according to the team members' biological sex assigned at birth. Supporters of the bill state the biological differences between men and women and argue that these give transgender women and girls an unfair advantage in sports over cisgender women and girls. And finally, trans women not a threat to women's sports. 22-year-old swimmer Leah Thomas has spoken out about the backlash against trans athletes. Thomas said that trans women competing in women's sport does not threaten the sport at all, pointing out the fact that there are very few trans athletes in the first place. She cleared out the misconception that she transitioned for an unfair advantage and stated that the reason she changed her gender was to be happy and to be true to herself. She said that while she knew she'd face scrutiny against her if she competed as a woman, she also knew that she didn't need anyone's permission to be herself and compete in the sport she loves. Let's go, Leah. We're all on your side. That's a wrap for this video. See you in the next video.